Hello, everyone. Let's give a few more seconds for people to trickle in. Wow, I'm still seeing the counts go up, so we'll just give a few more seconds as more and more people trickle in.
Yep.
Okay. Looks like we've got a great attendance today. Fantastic. Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Kevin Chou. I'm the Executive Director at BrightSaver, and I'll be your host for today's conversation. Thank you for taking the time to join us for our webinar, Democratizing Solar, Expanding Energy and Affordability and Resilience for 60 million Americans. We're here today because electricity prices are rising, and at the same time, nearly 70% of US households can't install traditional rooftop solar to defray those rising costs, whether because they rent, the rooftops aren't suitable, or the upfront costs are just too high. BrightSaver's new white paper, Democratizing Solar, looks at how a simple, market-driven solution, plug-in solar that works with a standard outlet, can start to change that and help households save money right away without subsidies or professional installation. Over the next 45 minutes, we're going to unpack the data, the policy, the human stories behind the plug-in solar movement. We're going to talk about why the US is falling behind some other countries on solar, what made Utah the first state to modernize its regulations, and how reforms in just a handful of states, such as the announcements already made by state legislators, BrightSaver and our allies in Pennsylvania, Vermont, New York, Maryland, and New Hampshire, could unlock affordable solar for tens of millions of people. Now, a couple of quick housekeeping items before we dive right in. We're going to record the session and we'll put it online in case anybody misses it. And we'll leave time at the end for open Q&A. So as questions come up, please put them into the Q&A chat box at any time. I'll be keeping an eye on those and we'll bring as many of those as possible into the discussion towards the end of the webinar. Now with that, let me introduce our guests. First, I'm thrilled to be joined by Cora Stryker. Cora is my co-founder at BrightSaver and the lead author of Democratizing Solar white paper that's at the center of today's conversation. She spent the last several months digging into the data, the policies, and personal stories that define who can access clean, affordable energy and who's being left out. Cora will walk us through the problems we're facing in the US and why, despite global solar cost declines, we're still falling just a bit short, and how plug-in solar can close the energy gap for renters, seniors, and low-income families. We're also very lucky to have Sam Matey with us today. Sam is an early career environmental scientist. He's a climate journalist and a geospatial data analyst and the author of the Weekly Anthropocene. He's been closely tracking global solar trends, where prices are heading, how fast adoption is going around the world, and why the US isn't keeping pace. Sam will help us zoom out and understand the bigger picture, how plug-in solar fits into the global clean energy story, and what we can learn from other countries like Germany and China that are far ahead of us on the clean energy transition. So here's how we'll proceed today. We'll start with the problem, global solar costs and adoption trends, and why the US is lagging a bit. Then we'll move into the solar access issue and how plug-in systems can unlock solar for the 70% of Americans who can't access traditional systems. And finally, we'll look at the policy in the future, what Utah has done and how a few key states could reshape the market. With that, I'll hand it over to Cora to kick us off.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks to everyone who's here. We're so excited to be talking about our favorite topic, which is balcony solar. So as I think most people on this call know, Kevin and I and our third co-founder, Rupert Mayer, we started BrightSaver with this vision that we wanted to make affordable energy, clean energy, solar energy available to everybody. And we saw what was happening in Germany and we asked ourselves, hey, why not here? And it's been a journey figuring out the answer to that question. It's a little different than we started out believing, but we moved quickly and we're working specifically on transforming the regulatory environment to enable the market so this can take off as a consumer-driven movement without subsidies, political friends, non-market solutions to drive it. So we're so happy to be here. This is the focus of the white paper that we're going to be talking about today. And, we at Brightsaver, we have ostensibly this narrow focus of balcony solar. We're the first and only nonprofit single-mindedly focused on these small PV systems. However, we see this as a way to unlock something far larger. And that is what we're going to be talking about today. What could the consequences of what is essentially a small change in regulation, what could they be for our nation in terms of clean energy adoption? And with that, I just want to say, some of you already know this, but I am a daughter of the Silicon Valley. My dad is a tech entrepreneur. So I really developed early this, I think, healthy skepticism of the idea that technology could save us and, or could technology can really substantially improve our lives. I know there's a great debate about that, but that was always my sense, is that gadgets don't make our lives better. The clean energy transition and climate has really been a radical shift for me personally, because my feeling is that we need technology to be part of this. We need to leverage all the tools we have. And so I want to start by asking you, Sam, is this crazy or not crazy? This idea that technology, in particular solar technology, is at this tipping point where it really could be one of the things that pulls us out of this sort of down to the wire climate crisis.
Well, put it this way. I've been absolutely obsessed with climate change since I saw Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth when I was 7 years old. I've been writing weekly about renewable energy trends since 2017. I think climate change is hugely important. I've studied it for my entire adult life and before that. And I'm now starting to think that climate change 1,000 years from now will be primarily remembered as the thing that helped accelerate the adoption of solar power. I think solar power is a ridiculously huge upshift for human civilization, and we're only now beginning to see just how big of a deal this is. So, would you like me to jump right into the slides?
Yeah, Sam has some
Yeah.
beautiful graphs. I'm a fan of graphs, as you'll see in the white paper, but I just think it really sets the stage for what we're doing here. Why are we here? This isn't a technological problem as we see it. This is an access and adoption and market enablement problem. So I'd love to see your beautiful graphs.
Okay, so the world has been distracted with ongoing authoritarianism and COVID and wars and a bunch of other stuff. But in the last 10 years, really in the last 5 years, really in the last 1 year, everything has changed in renewable energy. After decades of painstaking work in labs across the world, solar power is the cheapest energy source in human history. It has it last couple of years, everyone was super excited because it was as cheap as fossil fuels and then cheaper than fossil fuels, and now it's way cheaper than fossil fuels and still getting cheaper. Battery technology is improving too, arbitraging those clean electrons across time, so we can harvest the sun and then store those electrons in the grain silo of batteries. We are now seeing, pretty much based on pure economics, even in places with far right leaders like Hungary and Italy, we are now seeing renewables dominating new power plant construction everywhere in the world, even in the US. And this just shows this is global annual capacity additions from all sources. Non-renewable is brown, and renewable is green. This is just a we saw a tipping point actually right around the Paris Agreement 10 years ago. And now renewables are just overwhelmingly every year more than 85% off and more than 90% of all new stuff getting built worldwide.
Sam, what percentage of that is solar?
I'm about to get into it.
Okay.
Um, Almost all of it.
Okay.
Solar is driving the entire renewables boom. Like this is the global solar installations just keep breaking their own record every year. This is cumulative installations over the course of a year. So like how many gigawatts we get to after starting from zero in January when nothing's been built that year, and then in December, the last graph is at the end of the year. This is from Emble, by the way, a really great clean energy think tank, really leading the world right now. They're getting cited by The Economist, New York Times, everybody. Um, so in 2021, the entire world topped out at less than 200 gigawatts of new solar. 2022, just over 200 gigawatts. 2023, just over 400 gigawatts. 2024, close to 600 gigawatts. 2025, as of middle of the year, we passed 200 gigawatts, installed as much as installed more than we'd installed in all of 2021 in April this year. And we are just seeing that consistent growth. Every year, we get ridiculously vast new amounts of solar being built. And this chart is what is powering this chart. It is overwhelmingly solar power, the cheapest electric resource in human history, that is what is getting built in the world. Global solar power installations rose by 64% from the first half of 2024, this line here, to the first half of 2025. Solar is the fastest growing source of new electricity generation, not just capacity worldwide. So that's actual power flowing, not just capacity to produce power. A standard anti-renewables argument is, well, it's just capacity. What about when the sun isn't shining? Then your capacity isn't working. Well, it's generation now too. It's everything. So for context, we got 380 gigawatts of new solar power in the first half of this year. There were only 398 gigawatts of nuclear power capacity total from all nuclear plants still working ever built. We built almost as much new solar in 6 months as the entire global nuclear industry has built ever.
And so, Sam,
It
where does the US fall on this solar adoption curve? How are we doing?
badly. Most of this is happening in China. China installed more than twice as much solar capacity in the first half of 2025 as the rest of the world combined. And the weird thing about this is the US is installing more solar than it ever has, even this year with solar under ridiculous levels of political attack. But China is on another level. Like if you look at this graph here, China installed most like more than two-thirds of the world's entire nuclear power capacity in terms of solar in the full 6 months of this year.
Yeah.
I would guess that they've probably passed the nuclear benchmark. They have installed a entire world nuclear industry worth of power capacity by now in just this year. The whole rest of the world is less than half as much as China's building, but the whole rest of the world is growing too. And like if you look at this, if you looked at just the rest of the world chart, that's still pretty impressive. But China has just unleashed solar to an extraordinary degree due to a whole bunch of factors that I'm not going to get into here. And this
Sure.
year, actually, in the first half of this year, we're seeing that India, which is sort of the darker blue on this chart, at the bottom of the rest of the world graph, has actually leapfrogged the US. India installed 24 gigawatts in the first half of this year. That's 24,000 megawatts, and a megawatt powers about 1,000 households. So this is a lot. So India installed 24 gigawatts in the first half of 2020 of solar in the first half of 2025, up 49% from the first half of 2024. And the US installed 21 gigawatts, up 4% from the first half of 2024. So
Yeah.
US solar is, despite a frankly ridiculous amount of political sort of attacks on it, still managing to grow. But the whole rest of the world is just sprinting, and solar's managing to trudge forward with like arrows getting shot at it and weights being tied to its feet because it is just so inherently awesome in the US, but everywhere else is just leapfrogging us really fast.
So
And this
let's
is
talk about how we
so
can remove some of those weights in the US and, maybe not political solutions, maybe political solutions, because that's frankly why we are here, Bright Saver. We are really interested in unlocking accessibility for folks who want to adopt solar, who simply have no other options, renters, low income folks, people who have roofs they have to replace. So I want to talk now about how we can catch up, how we can sprint too, along with our peers. Um,
absolutely. Do you want me
yeah,
to get up
go
these
ahead.
slides? Jump straight into the white paper. I'm fine with either.
Yeah, I do have some slides. I think that the way I want to frame this is looking at how we are falling behind specifically with balcony solar. And for those who are not super familiar, when we say balcony solar, that's what it's called in Germany, primarily Europe. And the reason is because we're talking about these small PV systems, much smaller than rooftop solar, and anyone can install them. Primarily in European cities, they're installed on people's balconies, but they can go just about anywhere. They can go in your backyard, they can go on your patio, they can go on your balcony. But we think this is a key, not the only key, but a key to unlocking both energy access, clean energy access, energy affordability for the millions of Americans who just don't have access to rooftop solar. So yeah, so maybe what I'll do is I'll start with showing a little bit. Well, I don't think we need a graph for this. So in Germany, we had a series of policy changes that enabled the market, that allowed folks to install these without a traditional interconnection agreement. That happened first. That's what we're trying to do here in the US. That's what Utah has already done earlier this year. And that led to an uptick in adoption. But the real explosion happened in 2024 with the passage of Solar Package 1. And that protected renters from landlords who wanted to take these down, except in very specialized circumstances like historical preservation of buildings. And then we saw this just massive adoption, from the thousands to the millions. And that's what we are trying to unlock here. I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're looking at in the white paper, and in particular, who are we talking about? And maybe if someone could drop in the chat the link to our white paper, it's brightsaver.org/white paper, where you can look at this in more detail. But on a broad level, we're talking about engaging an entirely new group of folks who simply have had no other options. These are renters. We talk about some case studies in the paper that we have explored here in California in our pilot. We found that seniors on a fixed income were particularly interested in this. Folks who wanted solar but simply couldn't install rooftop solar because they would have to replace a roof. There are really powerful human stories here that we encountered. A renter who really wanted his landlord to install rooftop solar, but his landlord said no. And he had these really hot summers in a very hot part of California. And his energy bill was up near $400 in the summer months. So he was super excited to adopt this technology, the small PV system, backyard solar system that we installed for him. And we see this as just the tip of the iceberg. We see these as some of the categories of folks who will really want to adopt this. So Sam, do you wanna go into some of these details?
Absolutely. Do you want me to present the white paper slides or you or I'm oh yeah, yeah, sure. So would you like me to present the white paper or would you like me to sort of chime in as you present the white paper or what?
Sure. So why don't you show the white paper and the slides right there at the beginning? Actually, I'll share
Okay.
because I've got them all pulled up.
Sure, I got them
Yeah,
pulled up too, yeah.
yeah. So let me find those. Here we go. Okay. So can everyone see this? So this, if we're looking at it, is the cost per watt of balcony solar in Germany specifically. So you'll see that as adoption increases, predictably, the cost just plummets. And we think this is a good model for us. We think that we can do this too with the right regulatory framework. And this is something we go into in the white paper. And if we can enable the market, we think that we're going to see similar adoption curves. So this is in Germany. This is what you see in terms of adoption. And these spikes really do follow legislative breakthroughs. Here in 2019, 2021, you have the interconnection exemption. And then later in 2024, you have this protection for renters. And it's just gone up extraordinarily. I will say here, these are registered balcony solar units. We know that a lot of folks don't register. So we think that the adoption is closer to 4 times this in reality. And so this is what we predict in our white paper. And this is us really modeling out, okay, if we could have a similar regulatory framework, legislative change in this country, what would we see in terms of adoption? And we believe we would see very rapid adoption, primarily driven by payback period. So this is not a this is an adoption curve that is not motivated out of climate concern primarily. This is straight economics, and we feel pretty excited about that because we feel like once we can get the true cost for consumers closer to what Sam showed in the beginning, close to this really low cost technology component cost, we think we're going to see huge adoption really quickly. So if you look here, I'm going to go to the next slide actually, because we frame this really in terms of legislative change. And Kevin mentioned at the top the states that have already announced that they're going to introduce such legislation. And if we see this happen, and we think we will in a number of states, we're going to see costs fall quite precipitously. So today we're up at about $3 a watt. That is comparable to rooftop solar on a national scale. Utah is already down here. Utah is already at about $1.50 per watt. So this system already exists. It's because Utah passed legislation similar to Germany, basically exempting these small systems, saying this is a different class of PV systems that do not need to jump through the same hoops as you would have to jump through if you had a rooftop system. This is an interconnection agreement, permitting, et cetera. So Utah did that, and already there's a system there that is about half the cost of the systems that are available anywhere in the US. And then we believe that pretty quickly, once more states adopt this, we're going to fall even further to close to 50 cents a watt. And the reason for that is we're going to enable the market, more manufacturers are going to get into the game, and competition will drive down prices as we're seeing in Germany.
Well, that is really impressive. And I think that there is an incredibly powerful argument that this will be the case because this is what we're seeing in the rest of the world. One sort of interesting aspect of the US of the US sort of whole governance system right now, there was a very popular book about it this year called Abundance by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson, is that we've essentially done something which very few other democracies have done, which is kind of instituted a layer of government by lawsuit, which is instead of having sort of a state capacity to sort of decide on things, the US tends to leave it ambiguous whether stuff is actually legally allowed or not, and then wait for someone to sue over it, which tends to which tends to lead to a lot of problems. The US has something like four times as many lawyers per capita as France.
Mhm.
There's and basically it is sufficiently legally annoying to install balcony solar in the US right now, as you probably know if you have followed the whole Bright Sable arc and the white paper they produced, that people aren't for just free to do it. But in jurisdictions where people are free to just build solar, and do you mind if I jump back to my slide for a moment?
Please.
We are seeing some extremely poor countries now leapfrogging the United States in terms of electrification. This is from Ember recently, this chart. Countries including Chile, Namibia, Uruguay, Morocco, El Salvador, Kenya, and Turkey all now have a higher share of generation from solar and wind than the US. And several countries even have a higher share of final energy, which is not just electricity generation, but including all energy use, including like gas in cars, stuff like that, because there's lots of solar and they're moving into EVs. Places like Vietnam, Malaysia, Laos, Bangladesh are now more electrified than the world's richest country, the United States. And a lot of the reason for that is, and there was a and there was sort of a core sort of case study of this in Pakistan recently. In those countries, you can just buy solar. Like you can just buy solar in the marketplace, and someone sends you a solar panel, and you put it up on your roof and plug it in. You
Mhm.
get to do it. And we're seeing this in places like Europe too, like Germany, the classic balcony solar example. That when you can just buy solar, it's such a good deal. People buy
Right.
solar. And this is just a little collection of what it looks like in Pakistan right now. This is Pakistan. This is a country with millions of people in extreme poverty, and
Mm,
there's now just solar everywhere because
yeah.
for they can trade with China, which the US can't really do right now on solar power. There's something like 3,500% tariffs on Chinese solar panels in the US right now. Um,
Hmm.
but but the US also has its own domestic solar manufacturing industry, and the fundamental driver here is that people are allowed to buy solar panels and put them up, and that has given us this ridiculous growth of its surge in solar power in Pakistan from very little to suddenly like replacing a large chunk of the existing electricity system in 2025. This gigantic growth from 2023 to 2024 to 2025 in electricity generation
Hmm.
was going from like fifth largest electricity generation source in 2022 to largest electricity generation source in Pakistan in 2025. And Pakistan actually, just a couple of years ago, was sort of begging Qatar to send it liquefied natural gas to power its electricity. And now they're having to turn liquefied natural gas boats away. Like this is actually directly leading to emissions reduction and substantial trade
Hmm.
shifts because they literally are now close to having an electricity surplus. At least if they also need a lot of the people need more appliances, need a higher standard of living, but for the grid they currently have, they're having an electricity surplus from solar, and they're starting to talk about needing a battery boom to go along with it. And
That's
so this
right.
the parallel, and we're starting to see like huge takeoffs of solar panels in Africa, and it's not as big as Pakistan yet, but some extremely poor countries are starting to get um solar panels. And this is from an interview with the solar founder, a for-profit guy. This isn't an aid project. This is people buying it. Um, People are starting to build solar power absolutely everywhere they can because it's just such a good deal. And
Absolutely. And we see self-installation that you're describing, we see that as key. So if
yeah,
we go back to why the US is falling behind, I mean, our cost per
yeah,
watt for rooftop systems alone is many times what it is in Australia, what it
most
is Europe. And, we talk a lot about soft costs, right? This cost of installation labor, this cost of marketing for the solar companies, this cost of permitting, this cost of interconnection. But if we open that up and we allow Americans to do essentially what you just described, take matters into their own hands, buy this stuff at nearly the component level costs. Not yet, because it doesn't exist in this country yet at those dirt cheap prices. But we see that as the beginning. And in our going back to our white paper, I mean, that's essentially what we model. We model that we will allow self-installation with legislative reform in 5 states or more. And by the way, that's not arbitrary. That's what the manufacturers who are in Europe tell us they need to see to come to the United States in force to invest in R&D, compete against each other with multiple manufacturers and lower that cost. But we see that this just doesn't happen if we don't have self-installation. Why? Because it essentially almost entirely removes these soft costs, this red tape, this permitting cost, this interconnection fee, most of all labor to install the rooftop systems. So that's one of the reasons we feel like, in some senses, our mission is super narrow. We want balcony solar in the U.S. Full stop. But we see that as really the gateway to a world in which the cost of solar for Americans falls to what the technology actually costs. And in another sense, we also see it as kind of a gateway drug, it's been called. I like that phrase actually, because it feels good to produce your own energy. And there are a lot of people who want to be able to do this who simply can't. It has so many benefits. It creates more energy awareness. You start becoming more aware of when you're using electricity, how much you're using. You geek out on all of your consumption graphs that you get. So we see this as sort of a small issue that could have huge consequences. And that is what we model in the white paper. In fact, we project that with this sort of regulatory reform in the 5 states or more that manufacturers tell us they need to see to really come here in force, with that change, we anticipate 24 million households or 60 million Americans will have one of these systems by 2035. And we don't think, we are optimists here for sure. But we think that's a reasonable projection if you look at the simple economic payoff for the adoption. So, in other words, we see this as the key to making solar adoption more like adoption of an energy efficient appliance, LED lighting, an energy efficient refrigerator. It pays off so quickly that that it's an investment an entirely new and very large group of Americans can make. So, and we see it as connected to what you're talking about, Sam. We're kind of embarrassed. I'm kind of embarrassed that we're falling so far behind solar adoption relative to our peers. And we want to get there. So, so what do you think, Sam? Crazy or not crazy? Are we dreamers, or you think this could actually get us to a place where we're less embarrassed?
I think White Sable, with a tiny team and a shoestring budget, is one of the most effective climate organizations in the United States right now. Way bigger than the big names. Because you found this really, really key piece. You found this level point. Like, the classical Archimedes quote, give me a level and a place to stand and I can move the world. You found
Mm,
this level point where you can actually open a crack. And it's perfectly fit for the political moment. Electricity bills are skyrocketing. In part due to crazy federal attacks limiting clean energy build out. Um, the grids having issues. There's affordability is the buzzword of the moment, and you
hmm
are literally offering people model legislation for a one-page zero cost bill that doesn't even show up in the budget, that literally just deregulates the smallest solar systems so that people can put them up themselves. And I think that based on what we're seeing in other countries where they have stuff like that, that could grow into like become one of the biggest stories in climate action stories in the US overnight. If we get like 5 to 10 states passing legislation on this in 2026, we get a couple major European manufacturers saying, okay, now it's legal to actually sell our product. We can come and sell balcony solar in the US. That could go viral, maybe get a couple influencers. It could be a hockey stick growth. It could be exponential uptake. America is wealthy. America has lots of people interested in clean energy. It is currently bound in sort of a sarcophagus of red tape that makes it incredibly
hmm
difficult, incredibly difficult to put up rooftop solar. Soft costs are close to like 75% of the cost of rooftop
Yeah.
solar in the US, even though the panels themselves have gotten dirt cheap. In Germany, it's now cheaper to build a fence out of solar panels, not even plugging them in, just like little solar panels as raw material, rather than to use like wood to build a fence, because we have learned how to manufacture sheets of magical glass that you can point at the sun and
hmm
get power. People are manufacturing those. Even in the US,
hmm
there's a factory opening in Texas, there's T1 Energy that'll make 5 gigawatts of solar per year. This is a brilliant sort of out of the box thinking, instead of doing the endless push and pull at the federal level, going, okay, hey, state legislators, you want to have a win-win that gives you that with for costing you no money, lets your constituents generate some clean power. This is a brilliant, brilliant channel towards action in the US. And I am
Oh.
incredibly happy to be able to help share this story and write about
Oh,
it.
thank you, Sam. And I promise I did not plant that. I did not plant that, but thank you for saying that. You are part of the Bright Saver story, to tell you the truth. I mean, literally, but Sam and I know each other from before we used to work together. But literally before our interview with you, I was going to farmers market, handing out flyers, trying to get people interested in this. And really, that's an interesting part of this too, because there was this attitude I encountered where people said, "This is too good to be true. What's the catch?" Right? It's this cheap. That can't be real. It is actually real, and I
A
think
goat
that
farmer in Pakistan can now access solar easier than any of the people on this call can. Like,
right.
yeah, like
That's right.
Americans, there's sort of a whole dynamic in the US where the media ecosystem tends to sort of regard stuff happening outside the US as not real, but Americans are getting so screwed over here. Like
Yeah.
our government and our heavily fossil fuel dominated sort of interest landscape around federal legislators has made it very hard for tons and tons of people to access what is by far the biggest technological breakthrough of the century so far. I mean, for
100%.
like unlimited amounts of solar energy is I don't know if you've heard it's sort of a sci-fi tone, but it's climbing the Kardashev scale. It's there's more energy emitted by the sun every 5 days towards Earth
hmm
that we would get it
hmm
than we would get if we burned every scrap of fossil fuels on the planet. We have an entire planet worth of fossil fuels in terms of energy arriving at our planet for free every 5 days
hmm
from the sun. Total energy results for the rest of time versus solar energy received every 5 days, both around 50,000 exajoules. And I think that this is this is the fourth big revolution in human history. This is from Embo. This is not just my crank opinion, but I really think it is something really important here, much bigger deal than AI or anything like that. Um, we got energy from just human and animal labor in prehistory until the Neolithic agricultural revolution. Then we got a huge leap in energy abundance available because we domesticated plants to get their photosynthesis energy in the form of food calories for us. Then we got ancient plants in the form of fossil fuels to unlock way more energy for us. And now we're seeing another, bigger than any of the previous ones,
Hmm.
uptick in the amount of energy humanity can access. This is
Hmm.
by far the biggest thing happening on Earth right now. And a lot of it's happening in Chinese, which is why it doesn't
Hmm.
really get shown up in, it doesn't really show up great in American media. But this is already transforming the world. If I just go up like entire new landscapes, I'm going to China in January to write about some of this. Entire new landscapes are forming, sort of defined by solar panels. You've got agrivoltaics,
Hmm.
food under solar panels, ecovoltaics. A lot of animals actually love sheltering under solar panels. This is a this is absolutely reshaping the world. And
And
I
to be
think Bright
clear, what's
Saber is the
happening in
best.
China,
Yeah.
oh, sorry. To
Oh, go
be
ahead.
clear, what's happening in China is supported by subsidies, is supported
It is,
by
yeah.
a favorable sort of climate in environmental in governmental resources. We do not have that here, at
And
least for the next 3 years.
they're not doing it for altruistic reasons. Like, but what's happening in Pakistan isn't supported by subsidies. That was just people being able to buy solar panels in large part from China and put them up. And like we like countries like Saudi Arabia are building tons of solar. Like almost everyone else on the country, in the world, even countries run by very bad people, even oil monarchs and dictators, are smart enough to see that if you can put out big fields of this no moving parts technology that gives you
Right.
tons of electricity, you should probably do that. So we just have this
Right.
ideological opposition to it in the US. And I love that Bright Solar has found finally a way that's not arguing about subsidies, that's not arguing
Right.
about sort of federal support on this. This isn't even a money thing. This is literally a local scalable permitting reform
That's
move that is
right.
just trying to untie the limit. Currently it's like I think Kevin said in a response, it's like if every bicycle was regulated like an 18 wheeler. It's like if you had
Right.
to have like your truck driver's license and like 18 months of training to wheel a bicycle out of the driveway to go to the library. Currently,
Right.
a tiny balcony solar system, you have to submit like grid interconnection diagrams of your
Yeah.
as if you're like a giant substation or something. And people
Yeah.
are gonna do that.
Yeah.
Who
That's
wants to submit
ridiculous.
like formal interconnection diagrams when you buy an appliance? But
Yeah.
um, but in most of the rest of the world, you can just buy one of these, take it home, and then you have it. And if we can do
Right.
that here, it sh
Yeah.
should like Bill McKibben had a great line where he said, "This should totally be a right wing like freedom issue. Like, get the government off my roof. Like, let
Yeah,
me install solar
absolutely.
panels. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think we all see that.
great.
And I think that for those of us who care about climate, this is a tough moment for us. I mean, Sam writes a really inspiring Substack, a daily dose of climate hope. And I look at that just so that I don't feel depressed. But honestly, working in solar, I don't feel depressed about climate anymore because of what you have said, that this can be a consumer driven movement. There's something I can do, there's something you can, well, you're in Paris, but there's something that your average American can do to go and adopt clean energy, reduce their energy bills, and really drive this ourselves as a movement rather than having to lobby government to get on our side and provide these subsidies. And I find that super inspiring, and I think that's one of the reasons we've seen such political interest in this, so much interest. That's really, to tell you the truth, like not to be grandiose, but we sort of started this thing wanting to start a movement, and honestly,
You
we could
started
ask
a
Kevin.
movement.
Well, we could ask Kevin at the end whether I kind of think we have, and it was ripe. It was right time, right place, The world was ready, or the United States was ready for us. Frankly, North America is ready for us. We hear from folks in Canada and Puerto Rico and Mexico who want this too, right? Someone had to come. and be the lightning rod and tell this story. And this is where you come in, Sam, actually, because you helped us tell the story from the very beginning. And that really is what started this whole thing. We told the story to you first, then we were telling it to Bill McKibben. And really, the more we tell the story, the more people think, hey, this is a no-brainer thing that we can actually do in this political climate of paralysis, where it feels like we don't agree on anything. Many of us can agree on this. And if you look at some of the states Kevin mentioned, I mean, one of the funny things as I learn more about political maneuverings behind the scenes, I mean, everyone keeps their cards very close to their chest. So we know that of the five states have publicly announced that they're going to be introducing legislation. We know there are at least another seven more that are going to do this. Their bills are in draft. We look at them, we give feedback, and they're kind of doing their political magic behind the scenes before they announce, and they don't want us to talk about them, but we know they're there, and they're big, and a lot of them have bipartisan coalitions. Pennsylvania already has a bipartisan coalition. We were there for their announcement. So we really see, again, I don't want to be too grandiose here, but again, I feel like this little issue has ripple effects, not even ripple effects, even the movement scales to this idea of like, hey, we can agree. Maybe we can't agree on subsidies, getting heat pumps in every renter's apartment. Maybe we can't agree on that, but we can agree that free market dynamics should win. Period. Amen. Especially when we're talking about widespread clean energy adoption and energy affordability for the average American. In terms of controversy, yeah, we don't think that this should be a political issue. We don't think that this should be held up by federal uh, headwinds. And it's super exciting. It's really putting power back into the hands, or into the hands for the first time, of an entirely different group of Americans. And we're super proud to be leading that movement. And we're super grateful to you, Sam, honestly, it's for helping kick this off, for believing. I feel like you too are a visionary. You saw before those folks at Farmers Market saw, like, just how powerful this is on a small scale, right? Like for the individual consumer, reducing energy bills, super short payback period, but that how that can grow. And that, one of the things I am so excited about with this movement, I really grew up with this sort of paradigm of, you got to pick your issue. You can't donate to every issue. You can't donate to environment, to education, to equity. You have to pick one. Pick your issue. And one of the things I love about this so much is we don't have
It's
to
all of
pick.
those.
It's all
Yeah.
of it. It's making,
Affordability, it's clean air, it's decarbonization, it's climate, it's decentralized independence. Like if
yes,
it's power against autocracy. Like I have an article in my newsletter, like Ukraine is using solar power increasingly because it's hard to bomb. Because if the Russians bomb a nuclear plant or a coal station, you still have your solar panel and your home battery.
oh,
Like in
interesting.
Pakistan, which is essentially a military dictatorship right now under General Asim Munir, the government didn't even realize that this bottom-up solar revolution was happening until
Yeah,
they were like, whoa, suddenly we aren't getting demand on the grid like we used to. And like it is literally power to the people.
yeah,
It is an extraordinary thing, a thing to change the world with. Like
yeah.
almost anything else you want to do to make the world a better place will work better if you have the right to and have the ability to have your own little household power plant.
I think
Hey,
that's
Sam
right.
and
And I
Cora,
think,
just
oh,
want to
yes.
interject real fast. I don't know if you saw my show. We're getting lots of questions, so I want to make
Oh,
sure that we
oh,
leave
we
time
will.
for Q&A. So
Sam and I
maybe
can
we'll
talk
start that
forever. So
in
thanks,
a couple
Kevin.
minutes. Yeah,
Yeah,
why don't you
no,
guys
we can
wrap
do
it
it
up
now.
with some closing remarks? Do you want to make any closing remarks?
I just, again, I just want to close with this idea that the key to solving climate, or at least getting that tip of the spear in the problem, is equity. That to me is such a beautiful idea. That's why this paper is called Democratizing Solar, because we believe strongly, and I think we're already starting to see this around the world, that you include everyone, you give everyone an option for producing their own clean energy, offsetting their household expenses, and it adds up. It's people power. And there's no trade-off here between equity and climate. And we are so excited about that. Um, yeah. What about you, Sam? What is your final thought? Oh, you're muted.
People
Sam, we can't hear you. Yeah.
people asking a bunch of great nuts and bolts questions like how do I connect this to my home? How does this work? But in most of the US right now, to connect this to your home, you have to essentially do the same thing you would do if you were building an entire power plant, which is ridiculously difficult and which is the thing we're trying to fix with all this legislation. But in practice, it should be quite easy. It's plug in. In Germany, where it's a mature market and it's legally allowed to do this, you can literally plug it in and it feeds power into the wall, the reverse of what plugs normally do when you plug stuff into the wall. So, I'm just answering some of the questions as sort of a response. But uh basically, I think this is one of the single highest leverage, most promising things happening, not just in energy, not just in climate, but in the entire US political space right now. This is something no one's looking at that has the potential to unleash an extraordinary bottom-up wave of clean power. When this is on the front page of Time magazine in 2027, you'll know that it's huge.
Love it.
Yeah.
Right. That's a great remark. All right. Well, we've got lots of questions. I've tried to answer some of the more technical ones in here, but we definitely have a bunch of technical questions, and then we have a bunch of policy and state questions. And so I think, Cora, the first question, I'm going to roll up a bunch of different questions, in a
Okay.
Q&A,
Okay.
for you, which is we're getting tons of questions about states. We're getting questions about Oregon, Rhode Island, New Mexico, California, Virginia, a lot of states. And so I think obviously there's as you noted earlier, there's going to be a little bit of sensitivity where we want to make sure that the state legislator who's considering this is able to break the news, for
Yeah.
their own state. So I will say that we can't get into all of this, and we've been asked to keep a lot of these processes confidential. But I think a lot of people on this call
Even
would
I'm not
really
allowed to know all the
appreciate.
states. The states were state legislators said, please let me be the one to break the news and be the hero for starting this. So we can't talk about it.
Yeah, I won't even tell
I
Sam.
think, Cora, it would be great for a lot of people on this participating on the webinar to hear from you, kind of what's happening. Give them a flavor of the regions and what's happening on a state by
Sure.
state basis.
I've been
I
putting
mean,
into the 5 public states, the New York, Pennsylvania, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maryland. I've been putting the link to that in the chat.
Yeah.
yeah, every region of the United States. There is not a single region in the United States that is not interested in this and not considering this. And there are different stories people are telling, different, the energy independence, the deregulation story has been really persuasive to building bipartisan coalitions. I'll tell you just, and I guess, we've got 32 states who are on the map. And by that, I mean, anywhere from we have talked to the legislator, we've looked at their bill is in final stages before introduction. So that is about 7. We know that's going to happen. But there are a whole bunch who are still considering this. And so if you're on this call and you want to get involved, I would say the best thing to do is on our website, we have a form. Maybe someone could drop that in the chat. Connect us to your legislator. That is a great way. Even if we're sort of on the DL working with your state already, we will keep you on the list of folks to let know once there's concrete actions. We will put them on the list I'm going to give to Sam of which states to deploy actions for on the Climate Action Now app. But God, yes. I mean, Kevin, do you think it's too grandiose to say we started a movement?
I don't think so. No, it is unbelievable to see how many states are actively considering this at this point. I would say, I think it's fair to say, Cora, that we're working in the majority of states at this
Oh,
point.
for sure. No question. No question. And we know not every single one will introduce this stuff, but if our white paper, I mean, honestly, 7 we know for sure are introducing some of them big. We've got Pennsylvania on the map, we've got New York on the map. If we get half of them or even a third of them, honestly, we could be looking at this market transformation that we imagined in this white paper. So Yeah, and I
Yeah.
just want to say thank you, Kevin, for envisioning all of this, being our visionary and really pulling me into your vision and convincing me, and I haven't looked back since.
And I think I'll touch on another perspective of our state by state legislative work. So I think one of the things that I didn't understand when we first started this journey was how long energy policy takes
Hmm.
to to get done. So the lawmaking part is just the very beginning of the battle. But right now, I think Sam touched on this quite a bit. But if you're going to site and permit a new, let's call it a gas power plant, it takes years and years just to get that sited and permitted, right? But then the even bigger issue is actually building the high voltage transmission lines to get the power from that new power plant to the cities and in other areas where the load, is, for things. So energy takes a long time to get built. In New York, for example, is they've been working on offshore wind for years and years, and then the current federal administration comes and basically shuts the project down. Well, they've been working years for that new energy to get up and running. There's no simple replacement, for that project not coming online. Um, in the near term. So, a lot of when we then go to the state legislators and we're talking about the work that we are, one of the beautiful things is that it's a non-appropriation bill, so there's no budget required, right? This is simply unlike solar in the past where we've needed some form of subsidies, either outright or to ask the utilities to basically subsidize through net metering agreements. Plug-in solar in general, given Sam's charts, it's just become so cheap that when you take all the soft costs out and you create a DIY path for consumers to just go to an IKEA, a Home Depot, Amazon.com, or your other favorite retailer, go buy one of these things, do a small little IKEA project and plug it in. That immediacy is incredibly interesting for lawmakers because they could say, wow, I get to pass a bill in 2026.
Right.
And the day that that bill is signed into law, people will be able to buy these.
I
And so
can go
actually
to
one of the,
say I passed the bill that let this family have their
right.
beautiful solar panel that they just put up next to their
Absolutely.
beautiful Labrador retrieval's
Yeah,
house. Like it's really photogenic. It's really responsive government. It's an
yeah,
immediate thing you can do to help people with affordability issues.
that's right. That's
And
right.
it's not just photogenic. I mean, part of our theory of change is you need to get these into the wild. People need to see them. They need to touch them. They need to see that their neighbor has one. This is not going to be a conceptual movement based on pictures in Germany. So that is part of it too, is once we make these inroads, then we start getting this runaway train. That's the wrong metaphor. This exponential growth, like what we're seeing in Germany.
Right. Okay. So we do have a bit of one of the things that gets asked about. There's those questions about what happens when the power goes out, how, what about, like, what are all the different steps to actually get one of these plugged in? So I think Cora and Sam, it would probably be helpful for you guys to just go over what is the process for getting one of these things. Let's say in Utah, let's take Utah because that's really where the first state that we've been able to get this type of legislation passed. What would the steps be for a resident of Utah to go get one of these things and install them?
So it depends on how DIY savvy you are, but you could order one complete system. There's one manufacturer in Utah already. You could order it online. You could follow the instructions, plug it in, do it yourself. We also know that folks in Utah are already assembling their own systems. So they're ordering the inverter, the 120-volt inverter that plugs directly into the wall. They're ordering that separately from the panels because, to Sam's presentation, the panels are so cheap. So if you buy them separately, you can just reduce your cost even further, not quite by half, but by a significant percentage. So super easy in Utah right now. Not so in other states.
Yeah. And I see a whole host of questions right now that I'm going to ask Christy, who's I think from on the Bright Saver team. Is there a way that we can capture all the Q&A, both the open and answered, and then especially the ones where we answer, and we can try to include that in the on our website or otherwise, because I think a lot of great questions are being asked, and it'd be great for us to capture all of these and make them available. I think that's been a whole host of questions recently. Okay, let's see.
And actually, before we transition, did someone drop the link to the white paper in the chat so everybody can follow up with that? Okay, maybe one more time before we sign off.
Yeah, can we save these questions? Because there's a bunch of great questions people are asking. We should totally keep all this.
Yeah,
Yes, we will.
absolutely.
We will.
Great. Thanks, Christy. Okay, so we're also getting some questions about utilities and how do utilities play into this? Maybe, Sam, I'd love to get your perspective from a zoomed out sense of the utility business models and just kind of as you're looking at things. How do utilities think about solar in general? And then Cora, would love to then have you maybe touch on some of the work or discussions that we've had with utilities.
Well, utilities in the US are sort of inherently very small C conservative, which is a sort of a good thing and a bad thing. Their whole job is to not take big swings and ensure that power stays on for as absolutely as much as possible. The whole job is consistency, reliability. They're the exact opposite of like the Silicon Valley move fast and break things mindset. But on the other hand, also means they tend not to move fast. They tend not to really recognize new opportunities. And right now in the US, and a lot of this is not utilities' fault, it's bigger political issues and other stuff, but uh, US grids are kind of creaking under pressure right now because there's increasing climate disasters that are causing a lot of damage to power grids. There's wildfires, floods, like tons and tons of issues. There's aging grid infrastructure due to consistent Republican underinvestment in national infrastructure. Um, there's the AI data center boom, which, while a little overhyped, is still putting pressure in many particular areas like Northern Virginia. And solar can help with a lot of that. But it's so bound up in permitting regulations right now that there's not enough flexibility to sort of experiment and move forward with the options available because like there's so much chaos. Like there was a thing called the Grain Belt Express interconnector power line that would have connected up like across Missouri to interconnect some different areas of the grid and would have really helped integrate like wind farms in Kansas to power the Midwest. And Trump canceled it for no reason because it had clean energy on the name. Utilities are kind of embattled, trying to make everything work when they're being told to sort of do miracles on less money, and they're having stuff they had counted on being canceled. They are um, not having a happy life this year, and I suspect that opposing this as long as they're released from legal liability, which was a key thing that Utah did to get utilities on board. They basically say, okay, we're legalizing balcony solar. If something goes wrong with it, it's definitely not utilities' fault. That is like a sentence that they really had to include in that law to get utilities on board. Basically, I suspect that they'll be like, okay, sure, if you do this, just make sure we're not legally liable because we can't control or inspect all of this. Whatever, just don't bother us. We're busy. So
Yeah.
I suspect that they will not really realize how big a deal this is until it's already hitting like an exponential growth curve. Yeah.
All right, Corey, you want to talk about some of if you have anything to add about utilities and
The only thing I will add, Sam, I think you did a great job, is that, we just worked on a report from an expert in the field to really analyze grid dynamics, because we certainly don't want this to lead to load predictability issues. And that's a lot of what we hear utilities are concerned with. So we have a report, we're going to be releasing it soon, but sneak preview at the levels that Utah adopted that we're recommending 1200-watt systems. You could have 25% penetration, meaning 25% of the United States of America could have one of these 1200-watt systems, and there would be no net export to the grid, meaning the combination of all these systems and the time of use, et cetera, would make it so that we don't have an impact on the grid dynamics. So I think that will be very important for the utilities to
It'll
hear.
just lower demand. Like that's sort of like saying if we legalize home kitchens, there'll be less of an impact on restaurants. Like people will just be able to generate a little of their own power. They'll be pulling less from the grid. It should just be a major sort of dog that doesn't like things working more easily for the whole system.
We think so. And
That's right.
no net metering in the model that we are pushing, the Utah model, no interconnection agreement, no net metering. So we think the utilities should be excited about essentially getting free electricity, especially if they're not safety concerns.
Free demand production that they don't have to deal with or think about.
Right.
Right.
Whether
All
they
right.
actually see it
Well,
that way is not up to us, but at least in Utah, they managed to get the utilities to agree with it as long as we included a leave us alone clause. So,
that's right.
yeah.
That's right.
And by the way, we want to
All
bring
right.
utilities to the table. We want to bring Republicans to the table. I mean, we really, we're open arms here. We think it takes all of us to solve this problem. So we want to listen.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're at time, so I think this is a great place to wrap it up. Huge thanks again to Cora and Sam for sharing their insights, and thanks to all of you for your thoughtful questions and for spending your time with us. If you'd like to go deeper, please take a look at our Democratizing Solar white paper in the Join the Movement section of our of brightsaver.org. I think Sam posted a link to it there.
Thanks, Sam.
And plug-in solar is still a new idea in the US. So the more people who understand what's possible with a simple outlet in this new technology, the faster we can bring clean, affordable energy to everyone. On behalf of all of us at Brightsaver, thank you for being here and for being part of this movement. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you all. You rock. We'll all play to something quick here.
So do you, Sam.